When you work with someone, what is the process? You like, what does that look like?
So what I do is when I work with someone one-on-one, I give them some prompting questions to start with. I always encourage people to start by going through photographs because old photographs do something to us. Now we can just scroll our phones a lot of the time, but depending on your age and, the phone scrolling didn't really start until like, what, maybe 2010. So a lot of people want to go a lot farther back than that. So, find these photographs, but look for the photographs that aren't necessarily the key moments in their lives that they would say, but are the key moments in your life that involve them. So think about it from your perspective, because again, this letter doesn't need to be a list of how great they are and how the world's seen them. This is a letter of something they can't get anywhere else but from you. This is a letter of who they are through your eyes, your unique vantage point of how you've seen them grow, how you've seen them become, how you've experienced their gifts and their love and their failures and their get up agains and all these things because you've been there. So starting with photographs often gets us going down that path. And then I recommend with that before you've written anything is to go for a walk if walking is something you can do, or to just have a long sit where this is the thing on your mind. You let go of other to-do lists, you let go of, you don't listen to anything else in your ears. You just allow yourself to have this love letter on your mind and just think, what is it that I really want them to know? What is it that I really want to make sure is preserved about how I feel? So they always have that and they always know. And just let your thoughts ruminate. You're not in a rush. Just allow it to be there. And then that happens before we get on a Zoom call together. And so if I'm working with you one on one, we get on a Zoom and I ask a whole bunch of questions. And you're welcome to take notes if that's something that works for you, but I take mad notes and I write it all down. And I don't do a lot of talking. I ask the questions, I might ask some clarifying questions, and I get a lot down. And I usually record the call in case I say back to them something that I can tell they're trying to say, but they're maybe not finding the words because often when I say it, they're like, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. But if I'm saying it, I can't be writing it down. So I'll record that and I can go back to it. And then after that, I send them all of these notes. I mean, I read over the notes, I make sure that everything makes sense. I maybe add in some things that I heard them saying thematically. Maybe those weren't their exact words, but I get it to them. And then people have a choice. Some people are like, they take that and they go with it. Those are the notes. I give them a framework for a structure of this letter that works, that they can play with if they want, but it's a scaffolding. So they feel like they have this sort of, nest of a concept of how to write their letter. They're not just out there. What do I do? So there's sort of a beginning, a middle, and end. And some people are like, I'm good to go. And they write their letter from there. Some people write their letter and they send it back to me and ask for me to polish it. And some people who really, for whatever reason, don't feel like they can write that letter or they don't feel like they can write it efficiently enough or just like get it done in a day or so, ask me to write the letter for them. And then they have a read of it, they proofread it, give me feedback, and I do a revision for them. So there are different levels of it. But most of my clients, after they have the conversation, realize they have so much to say and they have the words. And with the notes, they feel completely empowered to write the letter themselves.
So I know that we're in a digital age, many people type out, but there's something about physical pen to paper. There really
Mm.
is something about it. Do you recommend using an actual, pen to paper uh, and writing the letter? Does it make a difference?
I love this question because that makes me think that you're a pen and paper person, and I
Yes, I
love
am
pen and
really
paper
a pen and
people.
paper person. Yes.
There's nothing like
Yes.
a great pen and wonderful paper or wonderful journal. I know you and I have talked about our journaling techniques together before. I think it is so specific to the person because personally, I've gotten to a point in my life where I actually write my first drafts better on my laptop. But I have a little laptop and I sit in a cozy place and I write, and it feels very comfortable for me because I can easily cut and paste and move things around, and that feels nice. But if somebody feels better with the handwriting, I 100% think that's a great way to go. And I recommend just skipping spaces as you do it so that you have a little space, like, or skipping two spaces. Write it so that you can go back in and easily just add little things in or say, oh, I want to put this part up there later on. So that would be my only advice. But I would say, it's one of the first questions I ask. What do you want this letter to feel like for the receiver? What do you want their experience to be with the letter? So people will say right off the bat if they want it to be handwritten, or if they want it to be typed, or if they want there to be photographs in it, or if they want an audio version of themselves also saying the letter out loud. So most people kind of make that decision as we're doing the process. And I think it's a really important part of it because if you know that, like, my husband is someone who, first of all, he claims that he's an awful writer. Okay, he claims that. We used to co facilitate an engaged workshop together. For 10 years, we did this. And we would work with couples who are engaged to be married. And it was basically a communications workshop. And a big part of that workshop is at two different places in this 2-day workshop. You write a love letter to your partner. And that we would do it in a bit of a timeline, but I could not believe what he was able to write in a handwritten love letter in 8 minutes.
Wow.
And I always felt like, even though I'm the one who's always said I'm a writer, I was always like, you have such a gift. And he would be like, ah, no, I really don't. I'm like, you have no idea what this means to me. And you just wrote that in 8 minutes. And so that's what he can do better. That, I think, when he gets the computer in front of him, it feels so official that he gets a little pressure around it. So if you think you might be someone with a computer that makes you feel intimidated, just pick up a notebook and see what happens.
Two things. I personally do pen and paper because maybe it was from all the years of me being in corporate America. When I'd write emails or write something, it had to be perfect right off the bat. So because we had to do it quickly. So when I type, that perfectionism gets to me where when I'm a paper, I'm pen and paper, I could slow down. I don't feel like it has to be perfect at all. And that helps me so much.
I love that you just said that because that's great self-awareness, and that's the kind of thing that you want to ask yourself when you start this process. Like, absolutely, if you feel like the perfectionist in you comes out when you're in front of a computer screen, I would recommend doing it by hand for sure.
The second thing I have to tell you, and my husband and I, we've been married for 20 years now, but we've been together for 23.
Mhm.
And my parents live in Chicago, his are in New York. So we travel a lot. And at the beginning of our relationship, Oren would go home and visit his parents in New York without me, of course, because we weren't at that point yet. He does business travel. I've done business travel. Since the very beginning of our relationship, every single time if he goes out of town, I write him a love letter. If I go out of town, he writes me a love letter. So we have like boxes of our letters and of course, all the holidays and our birthdays, we write each other. So we've kept these love letters. And the cards are hilarious because they're usually not birthday cards or something. Every single one of them has an animal on it, no matter how obnoxious the animal is. But it's fantastic to go back and read them. And this is something that, yeah,
What a treasure.
yeah.
What
My
a
nieces and nephews
treasure.
will get a laugh when we pass away and they get this big, box of letters.
Well, but it's a love story
Yeah.
is what it is. And I love that you're capturing throughout the whole marriage because marriages change and they go through different stages, and that's really healthy for people to know about and to see firsthand. And I think that that is a beautiful piece of legacy. I'm jealous. I'm happy for you, and I'm jealous.
So these letters focus on deepening the bond between the writer and the recipient, as you've displayed. Can you share an example of how the forever letter has strengthened a relationship or left a lasting impact?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I can certainly speak firsthand about my experience, but I'm thinking more about one of my clients who has two grown sons, and her two sons have had very different adulthood experiences. And when we worked together on her forever letter, it was so powerful for me to hear her describe from her perspective. They're both grown men now. And for her to describe to me the different ways in which she's been their mom. And when she was writing the letter, I think what she realized was because one has had different needs from her, especially financially, um, in his life, than the other, who's been much more self sufficient, I would say, financially. She knows that when it comes to inheritance, there's going to be a different outcome there. And the one who has been helped more knows that because she has helped him. But the other son doesn't know, hadn't known this, right? So that's going to be found out. That would have been found out, right, upon her passing, which she's not dying. She's healthy and well, but she was preparing for end of life. And this conversation led her to a place where she realized that she didn't want him to find that out when she couldn't talk to him about it. She wanted her other grown son to understand why she made the decision she made, because one of them has had more needs in his younger years because of challenges he's faced and struggled with personally. And she didn't want that to cause any kind of a rift between her two beloved boys. And so that really led to her having some very important conversations with them before she is dying and before they receive the inheritance and all of this. So that's not the thing. There's no hang up there, ultimately. Now, because of the nature of my relationship with her in this process, I do not know if I don't know how that conversation went, but it was really powerful to experience her realizing in writing these love letters to her boys that she wanted to have some very important conversations before they received the letters. And I thought that was a pretty powerful thing for me to experience her learning. I'm
I
not sure if that answered your question.
No, no,
Did
it
that?
did. It did. I know we've talked about the differences of when in a person's life they're writing the letter, maybe the milestones that the person that they're writing it for, what those milestones are. How does the tone or the purpose of a forever letter shift depending on the relationship or the life stage of the people involved?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think um, when I started this, I really, like I said, I thought end of life love letter. And then I had someone say, well, my mom passed away a year ago, and I really want to write a letter like this to my elderly father. And could that be a forever letter? And of course that can be a forever letter. It's the same concept. It's really a love letter. And maybe her father won't be living for much longer, but in his passing, she will probably get that letter back. And to just have that letter becomes a piece of legacy in the same way that a letter received becomes a piece of legacy, right? We write letters, we receive letters, they're both a piece of legacy. And so I think I've turned this into kind of three kinds of forever letters. And I call one set now these legacy letters, which is exactly what we've been talking about, these end of life love letters. And then I also talk about life letters, which are to commemorate a stage of life that feels very normal right now, but because we know that time moves on is fleeting. So when I think of the forever letters that I've written to my children, who are young right now, my kids are 14, 12, and 10. I think of them more as life letters because this stage of life, they're going to get older. They're going to become, bigger teenagers. They're going to be young adults. And how I know them now is unique from how I will know them when they're in college or beyond. And so I want to preserve this time of life and how I am as a mom to them in this time of life. And then the other ones, the other letters that I have become kind of popular are called launch letters. And these are letters that are at these commemorative moments, these big transitions where we know there's a before and after, and we know that life will kind of never be the same again. This is like the high school graduation, the college graduation, the wedding, or I should say the marriage, right? There is now a definitive shift in our lives. And yes, we can think back and remember before those moments, but it's different than writing it when you're in it. And so I really love capturing that. And I feel grateful to a few of my clients who are really on the cusp of being empty nesters who have shared with me how intense this shift, this impending shift feels for them. And that I have been able to work with some people who are trying to capture that because they feel very strongly about this relationship they have now, and they just know it's going to change and that they won't be regularly living under the same roof, and it's ending. What was is ending. It's not death, but it is an ending. And so I think the tone of those letters shifts because you know that they're probably just growing in positive ways from there. And so there's a lot of positivity and hope for the future. It's not, when you asked before about beginning a letter, what's my advice? And I said to just acknowledge what's happened, that you've passed away and this is terrible. This is awful. That's not the sentiment of a life letter or a launch letter at all. It's more of an excitement, but it's really just savoring what has been and what is today and leaning into it from there, just capturing this present moment, knowing that you'll read back and it'll put you back in that place, but life won't be that anymore.
What a gift, though, to give to your child. Can you imagine receiving this letter at that point of a parent's life when you are going through the same thing, or being able to refer back to that when you're going through that?
I mean, I've seen beautiful letter writing projects that people have done over such extensive periods of time, and it blows me away. And oftentimes, in the moment that a letter is received, it doesn't necessarily have the same impact that it does when you reread it much later. I mean, one of the things that I did as a new mom was I bought a line a day journal. Have you ever seen a line a day journal, like a
Yes.
5-year journal? And I saw it in the bookstore when I was pregnant with my oldest, and I bought it thinking, you know what? I would like to do this. School teacher at heart. I guess I should say a student at heart. I felt like this will be my homework. I will have proof that every day was of value as I raised my baby. Because so often, parents talk about how the days just blend together. And a lot of moms, especially stay-at-home moms, are like, well, what did I do with all that time? I have nothing to account for it. And I mean, of course, you have the child, but as your work, you don't feel like you have anything productive to show. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna write a line a day. And I remember on the day that my daughter was born, I wrote my first line, and my sister said, "I don't know why you're setting yourself up for failure like this." Because it looked so daunting, I filled that much of this, 365-page journal. And I said, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to give it a shot. And you know what? I did it. And I wrote it in the form of a letter. I wrote it to her, to my baby, who was, 1 day old. And then I kept doing that. And I did it every day of her first 5 years, and I did it for all three of my kids. Although I will admit, for my youngest, he got about 3.5 years. At
Always
some
that
point, I
third
was
one.
like,
Okay, take it
I
from
can't.
me, being the third, the youngest child of the family. The pictures show are proof.
The pictures are proof, right? But he got 3.5 years, which I'm still proud of. But I did that every single day, and it's to them. And I know at the time, obviously, that couldn't have meant anything to them. I was doing it for myself mostly. But now I have these treasured journals and of things that I've forgotten, and we can just open to any day of the year, and they can just learn about, the little things they had, like, oh, you had such a big burp today, it made you laugh out loud, things like that that
That's
I would
great.
never remember. But then I don't know if they'll become parents, but I know they'll be grown-ups. And for them to have this little insight into their very beginnings, it brings me tremendous joy to think of.
Amazing. Amazing. Have you encountered unexpected outcomes or transformations? And do you want to share any of them? And it's okay if you haven't, if
Yeah.
or if you can't think of it.
Well, I would say the one that I would say is when I was betaing the whole thing, I realized that some of the questions that I ask about, what has been the easiest thing to love about your child? What's been the hardest thing to love about your child? Those are two of the questions I ask. One of my clients just said, these questions are too hard. I don't know how to answer that. And it really made me realize that, I mean, she had so much to say once we got there, but some of these questions felt huge, which is why I started having people look at photographs first, because she was the one who said, I all I can do is I think I need to look at some photographs. And that helped me see that getting into deep emotions is not necessarily comfortable for a lot of people. It's comfortable for me. And I think I took that for granted because I'm like, let's go deep. That sounds exciting to me. It's scary for a lot of people. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I would say that's probably been the most unexpected thing and a great learning, because most people who are coming to me, I think, feel like I want to do this, but this is scary. And so I really try to help them be reminded that it's all in you. All of this exists in you. Let me take on the burden of helping get it out.
It,
You don't need to worry about that. So I don't want anybody to start writing before we meet. Just let your brain just be relaxed about it. Look through some pictures. If nothing comes to mind, I still have some other tricks up my sleeve and I'll help you. But it's that I think has been the most surprising thing for me.
when I do the legacy work too, I always beforehand we always say pick out pictures that you want to tell stories about. And it helps immensely. And they sometimes even have their family members all help pick out pictures. So it's really, really it's that's wise to look at pictures beforehand because it will bring back so many things that you forgot.
And I have to say, sometimes it's the photographs that would never have made it into the curated reel of great photos.
Yeah.
It's the photos that were accidentally taken, or the blooper that bring up the most wonderful feelings about your loved one. I personally, my favorite photograph from my family of origin, my mom and my dad and my sister, the four of us, is a photo that I took at a restaurant. The four of us were out to dinner. And I just took, this is before phones. I was maybe in my early 20s. I took the photo with my camera, and my mom's passing food. Someone's talking with their mouth full. No one's like smiling for the camera. And I love this photo because it was our table. It was our meal table. And that brings to me just this warm, chaotic, talkative, updating of the day, a little bit of arguing, like a little bit of, can you not eat with your mouth full or talk with your mouth full? All of that stuff that is the substance of family life. And so I think sometimes Instagram is not where you want to look for these photos. You want to look through the photos, the maybe the backup ones in your phone that you didn't put the heart on at the time, but tell a story of what's real.
So we are actually at the top of the hour. I want to ask you any other words of wisdom before we leave today.
Well, I just want to say that although this started as a love letter at the end of life to one's child, a love letter to anybody who is meaningful to you is well worth writing. I probably one of the most important stories of my life is that I wrote a love letter. And you say love letter, it sounds like it's a romantic letter. This was not a romantic letter. This was a forever letter to my math teacher, my middle school math teacher, who had a terrible cancer diagnosis. And I wrote a letter to him because I was devastated. And that letter turned into this incredible piece of legacy over time. And it meant so much to him. And I know this because many, many years later, I ended up being a teacher alongside his daughter, who I did not know back then. And we made the connection that I was the kid who wrote that letter to him. And she told me that that letter that was received days before he died, telling him that he was one of the most important influences in my life, meant so much to her, her sister, her mother, and her children, and even, her husband, so who was his son-in-law, in his legacy, because they didn't have insight, real insight into his whole professional life as a teacher. Because the family of teachers, they never get to go in the classroom. He's dedicated his whole life, though, to being a teacher. And here was this letter that she saved and they put in this album. And she has sent me a photograph of that letter since,
Mm.
that I wrote when I was, 22 years old. But that letter, that's the ripple effect, right? These letters, getting it down and sharing it, whether you are the sender, the receiver, whether you are the one at end of life or you are the one who is connecting with someone who's at the end of their life. These letters have great meaning. Their worth can't be quantified because it lives in the realm of emotions. And this is like spiritual, soulful stuff. But it's the stuff that makes our lives worth living. And it creates this richness in our life that nothing could ever buy, but that keeps us thriving and connected and love filled in this life. And so that would be the one thing that I would want to say is that forget if you're a good writer or not. Don't think about the past. You have the emotions in you. You've lived your life. So get it down and share it.
Thank you. And thank you so much today for sharing your stories and your passion and being so open and vulnerable. I really appreciate it. And I know my listeners do also.
Thank you for having me. And I just want to say that I'm so grateful that you've created this space to normalize the conversation about end of life because it's it's happening for all it's going to happen for all of us, and by not acknowledging it we're doing ourselves no favors. And so I love that you are open to talking about it from all the angles. I've learned so much from your podcast and different people you've had on your podcast, and I don't know necessarily when it's all going to come into play for me, but I know that it's embedding itself into my psyche. And there's so much value that I will be able to have with me as I go through some of these harder things in life that await us all.
Before we wrap up, I want people to know how they can get in touch with you, how they can work with you and connect with you.
Yes. Oh, thanks for asking. So I would say the best way to connect with me is through my website, lindsayhurty.com, LINDSAYHURTY.com. I also have a Substack called Becoming Everwell with Lindsay Hurty, and my YouTube is Becoming Everwell with Linz. And I'm on Instagram too, which is at Lindsay_Everwell. So any of those ways work. I will I would love to work with you. So reach out if you're interested.
We'll put all
And
those.
I will say I do workshops too. So that's become a new thing that is fun for me. I'm actually doing a workshop with a group of women in a month or so, and I'm going to work with them all to help them work on writing their love letter. And some of them, they're all just about to be empty nesters. And one woman has decided to have me. This is the gift she's giving to all of her closest friends for the holidays. And so she's saying, save this date. And it's going to be a 4 hour gathering. And she's going to provide some food. And I'm going to work with them to not one on one, but if they want to work one on one after the fact, of course, I'll be available. But I'm going to help everybody work through getting their letter drafted that they want to write to their person, whoever that person may be.
Well, we'll put all that information and all the links in our descriptions so everyone can get a hold of you. You're welcome. Listeners, today we've discussed the power of words and the legacy we leave behind, not just by the things we say, but through the love and wisdom that we choose to put on paper. Whether you're thinking about writing a letter to your child, a parent, or someone else close to you, it's never too late or too early to let them know what they mean to you. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.